Mollie, first round men's women's tournament. What was your favorite action that you caught?
For me, it had to be that Alabama-Maryland women's game, double overtime. Maryland comes back from a 17-point deficit to advance to the Sweet 16. And then on the men's side, too, you got a freshman hitting a buzzer beater to hit the Sweet 16 for Maryland as well.
Yeah, clearly on the men's side, the most exciting game. I took a little bit of a, we'll call it schadenfreude in watching North Carolina get stomped in the first round of the men's side. Ole Miss taking it to them. Everyone thought that they might make a run. Like they had that huge win over San Diego State in the first four. Wasn't meant to be. I'm a Georgia Tech guy, not really a fan of Chapel Hill, so nice to see them get knocked out so mightily by Ole Miss.
Well, I'm looking forward to UNC Duke on the women's side, too. I mean, we talked about rivalries the last few times we've talked, and here they come.
Tobacco Road, here it comes. All right, Maya, let's break down the men's tournament first. Some really big numbers coming out of that for CBS, TNT, TBS, True TV. The best start for the men's tournament in around 32 years. That's through the second round, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Pretty impressive there. And I think it has to do with a lot of these big name teams making it through. You didn't have the Cinderellas. And we look now at the Sweet 16. I think it's the first time that we don't have anybody north of a 10 seed making that far.
Austin, you broke the numbers, and I don't know why you tagged me on Twitter in your story because my notifications have been going insane because people have opinions on what's happening in the Sweet 16.
It was reflective of a strong regular season on the men's side. We saw what the SEC was able to do. We saw the number of teams now that the SEC was able to push into the Sweet 16. ACC has one team left in Duke. They're the only hope for my conference. We'll see how far they can get with Cooper Flagg and company. But yeah, if you are TNT Sports and CBS, you have to be happy about the teams that you're going to see in the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, and the Final Four.
They've changed their names so many times over the past few years at Austin, they don't even know what they call themselves. But no, the numbers are up pretty significantly, and it's very impressive. You've got to be happy if you're that partnership.
It's a combined average of around 9.4 million viewers. It's really important to actually spell out what that means. That's like a combined average for the windows as they are sold by CBS and TNT. If you break it down like by game, by individual game for the men's tournament, the average is closer to around 3.1 million viewers per game. So when people see that 9.4 million number reported, it's for like the 12 o'clock window and then the 2 o'clock window and then like a 7 o'clock and then a late prime time window. That is how it's sold to advertisers, but on a per game basis, closer to around 3.1 million viewers. Still incredibly strong. Good start for the men's tournament.
No, that's a strong number. And we've gotten the question on Twitter a couple times that these games are also not simulcast on Max. So you cannot watch these games on Max, the streaming service. So that is not inclusive of a streaming number as well.
All right, Maya, let's flip to the women's side. The numbers for ESPN networks for the first round that we have, it was reflective of what we have seen for the regular season and what we thought was going to happen in a post-Caitlin world, what we hoped would happen. Nothing was going to match the phenomenon of last year. The first round down around 22% across ESPN networks, totally expected, but up 43%. Molly, from 2 years ago, really strong start, I think, for the women.
Well, and that up 43%, I was at that 2023 tournament. That was a really exciting tournament that also had Caitlin Clark in the championship. But what stands out to me on the women's side is you and I talked about this last week. I can't remember if it was actually on the podcast or if it was just us bickering as we do. But you said you didn't want to watch UConn Arkansas State because it was going to be a blowout. You were right. It was 103-34, but that game on ABC still averaged 1.1 million viewers.
It did. It's a solid number. Right? People want to watch UConn. They are the draw on the women's side this year in particular. Paige Beckers and company. But I mean, UConn was always the draw before Caitlin. Caitlin, I think, was the first that I can remember. Just an individual college basketball player on the women's side to have that drawing power. Usually, in past years, it was UConn the program, UConn the team. That was such a draw. I guess we're seeing a little more return to that. But Molly, we were looking forward to a potential, and maybe we'll still see it, UConn USC matchup in the Elite Eight. But if we get there, it's going to be without one of the tournament star players.
Juju Watkins went down in the first 5 minutes of the game, and I saw her go down in the arena. I knew that was an ACL, and she was carried off the court. If I ever run for political office, it'll be under the platform ban knees, because knee injuries, especially in women's basketball, are so prevalent. This is the most wide open I've ever seen the women's tournament, and I've been following the women's tournament for a long time. So USC had the chance to make that run. Did either of us have them in the Final Four? No.
What do you think it means for the numbers? Like, I mean, Juju's first game in that first round, it didn't draw what UConn got. It was under 1 million viewers. This game in particular would have been strong, but does it take away from what you think the overall tournament might draw now?
It might be down a little bit, but I think people are still gonna tune in.
Well, it's going to be down. The whole tournament's going to be down big.
It's gonna be down, I think, from what it would have been if Juju was in it, but I think people are still gonna tune in. I mean, USC is a loyal fan base, especially if it's a USC UConn matchup. But I mean, you had Kiki step up after Juju went out and score, what, 38 points?
They still covered. They were 19.5-point favorites and easily covered that game. She went down in what, the first 5 minutes, so they have a strong team.
No, it could be a Cinderella run, which I think would be really strong. I want to jump back to you're talking about Paige and Caitlin and how Caitlin was that star power. Actually, they were the same draft class, right? And the only reason that Caitlin Clark was not at UConn was because Gino picked Paige Beckers. So that is just a fun bit of lore in that Caitlin Clark was being recruited by UConn. And I have somehow ended up on this incredibly niche side of TikTok that is Hamilton lyrics and Caitlin Clark versus Paige Beckers. And it is incredible, actually. Edits of Paige Beckers, how do you score like you're running out of time? I don't know how I ended up there, but I'm very grateful to be there.
I think ESPN overall is still going to be a good place for the women's tournament. I think we're going to continue to see this same sort of narrative. Down from last year, whether it's Sweet 16, Elite Eight, Final Four championship game. Way down from last year, but stronger than 2 years ago.
No, I definitely agree with that. Austin, did you watch the 2023 final?
I did.
Okay, yeah. So I was there and it was really, really incredible. And to me, it was actually stronger than last year's final, just in terms of the in-person viewing experience and the game itself. But no, ESPN, they're on a run.
But Mollie, the championship game, you got to get the casual viewers in, which means you're going to have some sort of draw there for the national title game if they want to match that Iowa LSU number from 2 years ago. And it's going to be matchup dependent.
I think it's kind of this dream Sweet 16 for ESPN, though. You have all of the big brands have made it through.
Yes, you do. Everybody that they wanted to make it through made it through. And a lot of people did predict that. There aren't too many upsets that go on in the early rounds in women's basketball. There just aren't. The powerhouses always make it through. You're never worrying about a 1 or 2 or even a 3 really losing early on.
In the past, yes, but there are more upsets. I mean, think about last year. Stanford got upset in the first round of the tournament. But Austin, my question for you is, do you think the numbers will still go up from 23 moving forward after this year? After Beckers goes?
We'll see. And I think this gets back to what happened to Juju. Let's look ahead to next season, and you can maybe answer this better than I can. Juju had another year left. She wasn't coming out in the draft.
2 more years.
So if I'm looking at women's basketball for the 25-26 season in particular, keeping the focus there, all of the attention was going to be on her. You also have Fajay Johnson coming back, but who else can really carry the torch if you're not going to have Juju next season to rely on? Because, I mean, if it's an ACL injury, that is tough to come back from. Maybe she plays next season. Maybe she doesn't. So who carries the torch for women's basketball next season?
Well, you just had AZ Fudd announce that she's coming back to UConn.
Yes, you did.
You have AZ Fudd, who just announced she's coming back for her final year of eligibility at UConn. She could have gone to the draft this year. And remember, to be draft eligible in the WNBA, you have to be at least 22 and a college graduate unless you're coming from international. So it's not like in men's hoops. And then you have the number 1 recruit in the nation, Aaliyah Chavez, who I think is going to be a superstar next year, who just committed to Oklahoma State. And then you've also got Hannah Hidalgo at Notre Dame. You've got Kiki Rice at UCLA. There's a lot of players that can pick up this torch, and I think will.
I love that we're talking about who is going to be the most marketable players in women's college basketball. I've maybe had that once or twice in the newsroom in my time at SBJ, so it's really fun to have the conversation these days. I mean, I know on the men's side, I know it's a shocker. I'm looking at Duke. They got the Boozer twins coming into Tobacco Road. We'll see if Cooper Flagg does, in fact, leave. I do think he's going to go into the draft. But if he does stay, because maybe he wants either another year of college or doesn't like the people at the top of the draft. So, yes, if there was a Cooper Flagg Boozer combination there in Durham, something I would definitely tune into next season.
I would 100% lock into that. That's a powerful trio.
Mollie, while we're sticking on the topic of basketball, I want to quickly touch on the WNBA schedule. CBS, Prime, ESPN, they all announced their schedules. Obviously, a lot of Caitlin Clark we're going to see again this season. What stood out to you?
Well, Indiana has 41 national games, and this is the first year the schedule is expanding from 40 games to 44. So that's only 3 games that Indiana has that are not going on national television. There's an extraordinary amount of games on ABC, but also keep in mind it is an expanded schedule. So I'm looking forward to my home opener, which I actually am going to miss my softball game that weekend because they moved the tip time from 3 p.m. to 1 p.m.
How dare they, Mollie? How dare they not consult you and your softball schedule?
I know. It's just to get that ABC window. It went from 3 p.m. to 1 p.m. for New York versus Vegas. What also I'm really looking forward to is the finals are expanding this year from a best of 5 to a best of 7. So will that cost me a little bit more money when New York makes that run? It will.
Ooh, don't jinx it, Molly. You have a history of jinxing things early. Let's not put the cart before the horse.
And then also there's gonna be games on Disney Plus this year for the first time, so I'm looking forward to that. There's more games on CBS than before. There's Ion. It's a good package. You've got 10 ABC Indiana games. You've got 9 for New York, 8 for Vegas, 6 for Chicago, and 5 for Minnesota. It's gonna be a good TV year, and I think the numbers are gonna be up this year.
I know they couldn't jump the gun, but I would have expected to maybe see a few more Dallas games. I mean, I guess in anticipation of Paige going there, but if you put Dallas on and then she does whatever, maybe doesn't want to come out, like there are some options there for her, I suppose. But you will have Paige Beckers likely playing for the Dallas Wings this season. We've seen what a draw UConn can be on the college side. Can Paige deliver maybe not Caitlin numbers, but stronger numbers if she's playing for Dallas on those networks?
Absolutely. There might be a chance that some of these games get flexed, especially if Paige gets off to a really hot start. Some of those games might move into different windows.
Well, Molly, we're going to have to pay attention to the WNBA draft. Do the Dallas Wings with the number 1 overall pick end up with Paige Becker? Something we'll see here in the coming weeks. Let's wrap up with a couple of other notes. I want to get to some media rights deals that are out there. One is the NFL draft. We haven't really heard much on that in a while. Belongs to ESPN right now. NFL Network also airs it. There was a report out there this week that Netflix is not going to be one of the companies that's going to be bidding. Not sure I agree with that. Not necessarily something that I'm hearing from my sources that Netflix is out. What are you hearing?
I'm also hearing from my sources that Netflix is likely not out because one, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like Ted Sarandos says a lot of things that he's not out for more sports rights. Ted Sarandos says a lot of things. The NFL draft makes a lot of sense for Netflix.
Sounds like Netflix says a lot of things that they don't necessarily mean. Their public posturing is very interesting on the sports side.
No, absolutely. And Netflix is being methodical about what they snap up, right? Like they're already in with the NFL. They already have those Christmas Day games. Getting the draft would be a big get for them, right?
It's a big event. They love big events, and this is a huge multi-day event that they can own.
Think about what they did with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, right? You can't necessarily create that amount of event, but if you get something like the draft, that's a built-in event. I mean, Netflix has an $18 billion content budget per year, right? They can buy anything they want. And keep in mind, there's a very good chance that Netflix is interested in purchasing a package of NFL games coming into 2029, right?
Yeah, Bella Bajaria already said as much. Like, there was a whole big controversy. Like, if something did came up, she said, yeah, Sunday afternoons is something that we would be interested in that scenario.
Yeah, and if Netflix gets the NFL draft, that shows the NFL that Netflix is very serious about the potential of getting those games. And it also makes a ton of sense. Think about how the NFL is more focused on global now, right? Like, think how many games are played internationally. Netflix is the most global company you can possibly have. It's a very natural fit. So, yeah, I've heard different things about the fact that Netflix might not be interested. I don't believe it's true.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot left to work out on that, so something else we'll be paying attention to. Another one on the right side, something we were able to break this week. The Breeders' Cup staying with NBC Sports through 2030 just goes with a whole strategy around horse racing that NBC has embraced. They have the Kentucky Derby, they have the Preakness, they have the Royal Ascot, they have the Pegasus Invitational. Keeping the Breeders' Cup. They were the first partner with the Breeders' Cup back in the early 80s. They've done something like 41 of 45 of the Breeders' Cup races, so something they have long been involved in. I love using this pun. It's staying in the NBC stable for now.
We were able to break, though. Austin, give yourself some credit. You broke that. Nice job.
Thank you, Molly. And, shout out to Sports Media Advisors, Doug Perlman's group. They were the advisors on that. Also, Proskauer getting that deal across the line. All right, Molly, let's finish up with a couple of properties getting their seasons started at the end of this week. First, coming this weekend, UFL Season 2 getting underway. What's a big thing you're watching for this year?
Those Friday night windows, Austin. It's replacing WWE SmackDown in that window. I'm very curious what those numbers are going to do. And also, if that just helps drive a more casual fan, giving an appointment viewing, knowing you can come Friday night, UFL is playing. First time spring football's been doing that. What about you?
It's a broadcast window on Big Fox. I think you are absolutely right. That's going to be incredibly important as to them driving viewership this season, seeing an increase over what they're able to draw that first season of the combined USFL and the old XFL.
Well, and then we also have MLB.
It's opening day, Molly, today. Opening day.
Opening day. Let's go. And now you can finally watch your Orioles.
I will be watching Orioles Blue Jays. Yes.
And Austin, something I reported earlier this week is around the ongoing issues with RSNs, but there are positives that are coming out of this, right? So obviously you have the national problems with ESPN opting out of that MLB deal. That's a longer term thing to solve. But in the local markets, the ad dollars are still there, and that's something I'm hearing from several big RSN heads that even though subscriber count is down, the advertisers are still very invested because the majority of baseball is consumed locally. It's something like 80% of baseball games are consumed in local markets.
Which is way more than on the basketball or NHL RSN side. It's almost like 15 to 20% less. Baseball, so heavily consumed locally, like you said. MLB teams in particular have to figure out where games, local games in particular, are going to be in the long term. There are some positives to take away. But like you talked about with ESPN, like this is the last year of that deal after they opted out. But you also were on a call with Carl Ravitch where he said he thinks ESPN may end up getting something done with baseball. He's obviously not negotiating those deals, but he seemed pretty positive that even though ESPN opted out, there may be something for them in these coming years.
And I'm gonna trust Carl when he says that because he's been there for 30 plus years. So while, as he says, it's above his pay grade, he probably knows a little bit about what's going on there.
He's also echoing what Jimmy Pitaro kind of said. Like, yeah, we would be interested in negotiating something else with baseball. It was just not on a deal where we're paying $550 million and making 150. The math doesn't work there, and he wasn't going to keep doing that.
The math is not mathing, but everyone has their nose pressed up against the glass. I think that's a direct quote from NBC. But I've heard that pretty much everybody is interested in getting some piece of the pie from MLB, whether that's a Netflix, an Apple, a Fox. There are people that are very interested in this package that ESPN has opted out of.
Yeah, and you and I talked about last week. It's kind of figuring out what these next 3 years look like. Who would want these properties? It was also reported this week that, the home run derby on its own could be worth $30 to $50 million. Is that something that somebody wants just for 3 years, though? So getting to 2028, what it looks like in the interim, those 3 seasons, very important for baseball in figuring that out. Rob Manfred, a lot of smart people at baseball, probably looking at this every day.
Well, and 3 years is kind of an odd window package to sell. But MLB is very, very invested, obviously, in getting this package sold, and it's going to be flexible.
I know it's something we're going to continue to pay attention to, Molly. I'm amped for opening day. I know you are too. Can't wait to catch some baseball. I'm going to be glued to my TV, maybe taking a nap in between some innings. That's just how I consume my baseball these days in my ripe old age. But before we get to our guest this week, Molly, this week in sports media history, no surprise, I'm going to find some sort of way to again reference Georgia Tech. It was the first Masters, 1934, the brainchild of a Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket. That was Bobby Jones. Molly, you ever been down to Augusta National? I sure haven't.
I have not, even though I lived in Georgia for 5 years of my life. But of course, it came from a ramblin' wreck from Georgia Tech. But that first tournament ended with Horton Smith winning with a 20-foot birdie putt on the 17th hole. He was just one stroke ahead of Craig Wood. The Masters starts in 2 weeks. April 10th, we'll have some folks on the ground there. You can catch all the action on CBS and ESPN.